This is Series 3 of Away, a podcast for anyone exploring 12-step sobriety. I'm your host, Steph Roberts.
Okay, I have this off. I'm just timing myself so that I'm responsible. My name is Steph. I am an alcoholic. Hi. If I slur a little, it's because even 12 years after quitting smoking, I suck on these lozenges. I went off them for a while, but now I'm back. They make me less hungry. And also, over the years, Botox has sort of made me a little slurry. So, just saying, we're rigorously honest. Not going to hide the work. Tummy tuck, whatever. So, I was really listening to a lot of you guys, and my experience in AA is very different in some ways. I am an atheist. I have remained an atheist for 9 years of this sobriety. I should have more time than him, because I came in 15 years ago and stayed for a little over 3 years. And I did not do the work. But I want to preface the work by saying that, and this is something my husband, a gift that he gave me, the work is step 12. The work is the focus of today's meeting, right? The other steps are the prep. These are getting you ready to help other people. Until you have what I say, instead of a spiritually fit life, is that you've rediscovered your conscience. Until you've done that, because I don't have the supernatural aspect in my life, but however you want to look at it, spiritually fit or rediscovered your moral compass, which I believe is within all of us. I mean, there are psychopaths in here just like there are out there, right? It is a microcosm of the real world. So you do have to keep your wits about you to an extent, young people. Don't be naive. And it says constantly, like in the big book, don't trust your instincts. Trust them. If someone's creeping you out, that doesn't need to be your friend. Just saying, especially to the ladies. Predators are everywhere. So the work for me is step 12, and it is 9 years on. What keeps me sober is speaking, sponsoring. Those are the services that mean the most to me. But, everybody talked a lot about sponsorship, and you may not be ready for it. You may feel nervous. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. But there's all kinds of service to be done here. There's all kinds of ways to help. And if you're nervous or you don't feel ready, it's my feeling just going up to the newcomer and introducing yourself and saying, I'm here, here's my number. That's, a way to start, a way to get in there to break the ice. But it is the reason I am happy. I'll tell a little bit of my story, why I qualify to be up here at all. I came in 2004 for the first time. Spent about 3.5 years. I didn't do the steps. I didn't go through the big book. I didn't have a sponsor who'd done either of those. She's still my friend to this day. She's an amazing woman, full of compassion and love, and I wouldn't have stayed sober for those 3.5 years without her service and her support, and the support of the groups. In that first time, the little I did know about the book, I took quite literally, as some people do, and that is wonderful if it works for you. But I took it literally to the point where I thought I had to change everything about myself, like everything. So I'd been this bleeding heart liberal, I'd been an atheist my whole life, I'd been this, I'd been that, and I was like, I gotta change it all. So I got a really boring, very conservative boyfriend. I dressed really waspy and preppy like my dad had. My dad was a super wasp. I did everything outwardly differently, but I didn't really change anything inwardly different. I changed my outsides. And whatever, it worked for 3.5 years. And I'm pretty sure if I had been drinking at the rate I was drinking and using drugs, I would be dead if not for those 3.5 years. My sponsor went out, sort of unsurprising, some might have said. And I was like, I was a dry drunk. I'm what they describe as that, like, I'm not medicated. I'm a highly anxious person. I take Lexapro now, which, fine if you're not a meds person, I am. I can't live without it. It manifests physically for me, so I spent those 3.5 years without the one medication that had worked my whole life for extreme anxiety, alcohol. So there I am, like shaking and clutching. I don't even really have a program. I'm not really doing service because I'm not equipped to, right? I haven't been through the foundational steps. So when she went out, it was easy to go out myself. I had grown up in a world, I was adopted, and brought into a world that I really didn't feel like I fit into from a very young age. Like from 5 years old, I grew up in a very probably younger. I grew up in a very fancy, waspy world, prep school on the Upper East Side. Everybody's blonde and downy and pretty and perfect. And Bo and Blair are the names, it's the 80s, Southampton in the summer, like no camp, you just run on the beach with all these pretty people. And I was pretty, I didn't know it. I felt like I was like short and stubby and ugly and brown haired and like everything was wrong with me. I wasn't one of these people. So, by 12 years old at our beach club in Southampton, I was dressed in all black, locked in our locker, chain smoking all day long while all the Bows and Blairs ran around, right? And I remember this so clearly, like at 4 years old, we had to learn to swim in the ocean with one of these play groups, and Bo and Blair grab onto the rope as they're going out to learn, and the fear was already there. The fear of looking different, of messing up, of somehow making it obvious to everybody else that I couldn't do something. Fear led me from a young age, and feeling different led me from a young age. And I remember so clearly, which is strange for at such a young age, refusing to go in and sitting in the kitchen with the leader of the group's mom and eating. So very early in my story, addiction takes hold with food. And I am a food addict throughout most of my story, like anything I can get my hands on. I start stealing money around 11 years old from my parents to buy food. Because I don't feel like I fit into my prep school, I find a group of friends who hang out on 135th and Lenox. So I leave school, I roll up my school uniform as short as I can, make sure the boxer shorts I'm wearing are showing underneath, slap on some bamboo earrings, pick up a 40 on the way. Suddenly my walk changes. I'm like walking like an OG. Purple, whatever. I'm not an OG, right? I'm not going to sleep to the sound of gunshots. These were the people I felt like I fit in with. Men. 18, 19, 20, and I'm 13. I poured a little out for my home. Like, what homies am I pouring anything out for? I don't have any dead homies. Like, that's not happening in my life. Right? But that's where I felt more comfortable. Like, these were, and they drank more like me. Like, my little prep school friends were like, oh, I have eczema. I'm tipsy. I'm like, I don't know what that's about. 340s by 13 years old, I'm in. So I didn't have anyone to compare myself to then. Like they say, like I drank differently from I have no idea. I did not drink differently from my friends at the time. I started getting in a lot of trouble with my parents all the time. And I'm already pretty detached from them, whatever, an attachment disorder maybe. But I don't really give a hoot what, the language thing can be hard for me. I don't really give a hoot how I treat them. And that's from young. Like the minute I start stealing money for food, that other behavior comes in where I stop caring about anyone else. I have my primary focus. So when food switches to alcohol, it gets worse. The behavior gets worse. I'm lying to them constantly. I'm getting in trouble constantly. One night there was this kids club we all used to go to. And all the prep school kids go to this 3-floor club run by this super wealthy family, Mike Heller and everything. And all the kids go in, and there's no drinking, of course. And so I was like, I bring my Uptown boys, I'm like, come hang out outside here. Not thinking that, this could be dangerous. Like, the people I hung out with fought. Like, they carried guns, like, they were no joke. So I'm like, come on down. We'll sort of, be bullies on the outside. And bring 40s. I had lied to this was so great, and I just remembered it. My lies were fantastic. That's why when anyone tries to lie to me in the rooms like a sponsee, I'm like, don't. I've told them all. I know them to a T. Like, I can do every detail. I had told my parents that because it was this kids club, there were buses that left the club every night at midnight. This was so I could stay out later, midnight and 1. And that I would take one of these free buses that dropped you off in various neighborhoods very close to your house, like the jitney, right? Like the little club has a jitney. So I convinced them of this for like a year. One night, my cat is dying. And so my mom calls the club to be like, could you page Stephanie? That's when she finds out there are no buses. She's like, are there buses? No. So my mom and my dad was much older too. He was like 22 years older than my mom and looked like a grandfather. Everybody thought he was my grandfather. Come driving up in their Oldsmobile station wagon that we used to call the Silver Bullet. And they come up and they sit outside the club. They find me. My mom gets out and gets me. And I refuse to come home. I'm just fighting with her. I'm drunk. I'm smoking pot. Like, everything's a mess. I scream. I am horrible to her in front of everybody. And then I don't get in the car and I make them go home. Like, I'm trying to humiliate them. Meanwhile, I just look like a fool, right? I mean, like, the normal kids who see me behaving this way are like, meh, that's not cool. But because of that kind of trouble, I realized I probably needed to start fitting in with the girls at my school. And that's when I start to see the chameleon come out. You hear that a lot here in my story. And I find a way to fit in. I dress the part when I'm with them. I change when I go uptown. I go to horrible places in the city like Dorian's, Red Hand, which is just like a hot mess of a bar. It's all underage. They never carded. Like, that's where the Central Park rapist left when he, went into the park in the 80s. So it's like a bunch of frat boys, but the bad frat boys, not the good frat boys. But I started hanging out there. I'm getting into less trouble. I'm a weekend warrior through high school, weaving my way in and out of different groups of people. I wasn't actually ever a bully myself. I very much defined myself early on as a bad girl. And the bad girl is the bully who bullies the bullies, right? So I was like, everybody kind of liked me. Everybody was a little afraid of me. Weekend warrior through college. My father gets sick. He dies in my senior year of college. I still managed to graduate because I went to a college that was way less smart than I am, which is clearly a sentence that makes me sound incredibly smart. So it was less smart. But I chose it so that I could glide through it without going to class. I leave college. I get a job. I'm there. My boss is an alcoholic at the time, still an alcoholic. Very quickly, I start going for liquid lunches with her. We bond over cats and booze. So I go, I'm drinking every day now. I'm sneaking booze back into my job, drinking on the sales floor at a very upscale retail store, whatever. So my life is going down the pooper. And, it's bad. It's bad. I can't even look in the mirror. I'm gaining weight. I hate myself. The script in my head is terrible. So my solution, I never thought I was an alcoholic. A shrink at the time had given me a copy of Living Sober, and I was like, I don't know what this is for. Then he gave me a copy of The Power of Now, and I was like, no idea. So I stopped seeing him. And instead, I found a boyfriend, one of my bosses at work. I thought that'll solve it. Did not solve the problem. Would sneak out after he went to sleep. He was someone who drank a shandy. Like, I don't know if you know, it's half beer, half lemonade. And he would drink it for he was Scottish. He would drink it for 2 hours while I got absolutely wrecked. So then I thought, moving. If I move, everything will change. So he was Scottish. I thought Scotland was an ideal place to go because nobody drinks there. So, right, basing this maybe on his shandy, but maybe a delusion. I go, My drinking changes in that I'm not drinking during the day. I have a job. I drink all night. Do really shameful things to him. Then I basically ghost him. I'm just like, early June, I go, I'm leaving. Leave him with his horrible family and just leave and never talk to him again. Like, just leave him there. Treat him like a POS. Come back. Within a month, I'm in AA for the first time. Do the 3.5 years of not really doing anything but not drinking. Go out. When I go out, I've got booze and food. Booze and food. That's all I do. 260 pounds, size 22 by the end of a 4-year relapse because I don't have any tools to live. I only have my medications, right? Booze and food. I'm now a binge drinker because it's easier to live that way and it's also easier to ignore the problem that way. I fall in with a very wealthy group of people going to a very fancy bar who can provide me with the things I need to drink the way I want to drink for 36, 48, 72 hours at a time without throwing up, without blacking out. That had been a big part of my story, blacking out, coming to in very dangerous, shameful situations, which I would like to say to the women, do not have to be shameful, right? That doesn't have to be the emotion associated with those choices. Or men, I guess. Anyone sort of sensitive. So the binge drinking, it actually gets a hold of me in a way that the daily drinking didn't, because I didn't hit one of those really terrible bottoms of daily drinking. I wasn't shaking, right? So it was bad, and I wasn't showing up. One of you said that. People show up. So whether it's by God's grace or whether it's what I believe, it's a moral compass, it's a rediscovering of your conscience, whatever it is, people keep showing up here. And without that, none of us could do this, whether it's by God's grace or not. You just couldn't if everybody in this room didn't keep showing up at different meetings, right? So anyway, I don't show up for any of my friends at the end of my drinking at all. All the time it happens. My last night drinking was really no different from any other night. It was a binge. But the next day I had the baptism of a very good friend's new baby, and I was crust around my nose, right, like still drunk 48 hours later. I'd been drinking from Friday to Sunday. All these people had been in my house, then we went to another friend's house. It was typical. It was a typical night for me of binge drinking. And I'm leaving. I'm like terrified to leave alone because I'm all paranoid because of how much coke I'd done and how much I drank. I'm up and down and up and down. And my friend Megan is like, I'll walk you home. So she takes me home and I'm like, I got to go to the baptism. I got to go to the baptism. She's been partying with me the whole time, but she's not an alcoholic. She just had a bad period where there were some binges. And she's like, you can't go into church this way. Like, you're disgusting. And I was. So she got me home. I went to sleep. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. And I thought about killing myself in a totally different way. Like, I'd had thoughts of I wish it would all end or wouldn't it be easier if. But there's thoughts and there's like ideation, right? There's thoughts and then there's actually the planning of it. So I was planning it. And this is what many people would call God's grace or a God wink or whatever, a moment. I just think it's because I'd had AA in my life before. I knew that it could do the job. I knew that sobriety was an option and it was a choice I could make. So instead of going to the roof of my building and jumping off, which also seems a little scary, by the way, like what if you regret it mid-jump? You yell like, there's no stopping it. So I called my ex-boyfriend, Jay, who was still sober, and I wasn't ready to go back to AA yet. He said, I'll come over, I'll bring Antabuse. You can't take it yet, but, whatever. I lived on Antabuse in fear for about 3 months, just fear of feeling that way again. My hangovers were clearly alcohol poisoning. Like, if anyone felt that way now, you'd be like, I have to go to the hospital. My pores were as big as my nostrils. You're like sweating and hot, but you're also cold. It's kind of like having a terrible flu. Just it keeps me sober to this day to remember how those hangovers felt. They were so painful. And I would punish myself with them for days, like not hair of the dog, nothing. So I live in fear of that feeling and the shameful behavior and abuse for about 3 months. I'm at a point where I cannot look in the mirror. I've gotten rid of the mirrors in my house completely. Can't look in the mirror. The script in my head, and I just remember this line so clearly, the script in my head, like when I would cross the street, I lived in the city, only moved out here for him 4 years ago. I love it, but, never thought that would happen. I would cross the street and I would think, these cars are only stopped because it's the law to stop. They would hit me if they could, right? Like, that's the running script in my head. They would hit me if they were allowed to. Firstly, no one's thinking about me. Like, no one in the car is even thinking about me. So there's that delusional, self-centeredness, right? And that's when they talk about, even the depression and the woe is me can be self-centered, right? Because literally, by the way, nobody's thinking about you. The people who care about you are thinking about you, but nobody else. And anybody who is kind of doesn't matter. If they're judging you, that's their problem. That's their poison. They can drink it. It's none of your business. So, that's where I'm at. I come back to AA. I decide to do it right. I get a hard-ass sponsor who's taken me through the book, making me do the steps, knows I'm an atheist, so takes me through them in a secular way, in what I now discuss as a cognitive behavioral way. Which, if you want to talk about, if that's something you're struggling with, I'm happy to. I do a podcast on it, too. At its core, these men did know something. The context of history matters, right? It is 1939 when they write this, so it is pretty amazing. This is before cognitive behavioral therapy existed. It is pretty amazing that the basics of what we use a lot now to change our thought patterns, is right here. So you can take that from it. She takes me through it in a secular way. We do the steps. She makes me do service. But in the beginning, it was speaking when I could, sharing when I could, which does help other people, right? Just sharing, just getting your hand up is a way to help another person because someone in the room may identify with what you're saying. And making coffee, stuff like that. I wasn't ready. Introducing myself to the newcomers. I wasn't medicated for the anxiety yet, so it stressed me out a lot to come to meetings. I'd shake, I'd sweat. It was terrible, especially big crowds. I still avoid that when I can. But she said, sit up front, look at the speaker, share from up front. Just focus on why you're there. Listen, whatever. So she gave me a lot of tools. She gave me a lot of tools for rewiring my brain, which is really what 6 and 7 are about, right? This is some of your foundation. This is noticing the bad thought, whether it's judgment of someone else or of yourself, catching it, and changing it. We actually don't have a lot of free will over the first thought. That's pre-wired from our life before. But we do have a choice over the next thought and the next action. So for me, it was all about rewiring that. It was about seeing the first horrible thing I said to myself and then literally a practice like yoga. There's no perfection. But with practice, even though it felt like a lie, no, you're not ugly, no, you're not disgusting, no, you're not fat, stop it. By then, when I get down to 10, 11, and 12, it's become a working part of my mind, just like it says in the promises. This is now a working part of my mind. How great is that I can do this? Now that I've done this and I've been entirely honest with myself, let me say this. Early sobriety, entirely honest with yourself, is only as honest as you can be with yourself in those beginning years. You're not going to discover everything. This isn't, and I don't believe in doing a second step 4, although many people do, because this becomes a working part of your mind. You become able to see the mistakes as you make them. You discover new things. You have new memories. Your list of amends you need to make grows. So even as it shrinks, you're like, oh yeah, maybe I was bad to that person, and you make amends as they come. it's hard to put to words how how really strong this program is, no matter how you interpret it, no matter what your higher power looks like. I do think working with a sponsor is super important, if only to have someone to remind you that your shame can now help someone else, right? This is how we get rid of the guilt, shame, and remorse. It's not just about saying it out loud to yourself and one other person, and God, if that's your thing. It's about being able to now use it, right? I mean, the things I did that I am so ashamed of in sobriety, the situations I put myself in with men, the horrible ways I treated my friends and my parents, all of that, all of those stories, those really yucky stories that fill me with terrible feelings, are in these rooms something I can use to help someone else. And that alleviates a huge amount of the shame associated with it. Not the guilt necessarily, but guilt and shame are two different things, right? I still feel guilty about some of it, but I make amends all the time by living a different life. And I'm not like a thumper. I'm not super into every aspect of the book at all. And I don't think you have to be. I take it in the context of history. It's very important to me. And Richard talked about this, and the history of AA is what rooted me to it, because I went through the first time, I was like, misogyny, God, crossing it all out, like my liberal girl came out fierce, and she was not having any of it. When Richard gave me a history lesson, a true history lesson about who these men were, where they came from, I got enough information to then go out and research more and to really understand how forward-thinking they were for the time they were coming from. Like, they are incredibly forward-thinking. Does a lot of other stuff come into it that may make some of us uncomfortable now, especially in this time where we always have to be like safe and nice? Sure. But it's still amazingly forward-thinking for the time. And Bill goes on in a lot of later writings to talk about how he worried that the rigidity of the big book originally actually pushed some people away, like atheists and agnostics, that fewer people were being helped because of his original rigidity. But it was also, he was zealous, right? I mean, he was excited to give this gift to other people. That's the core of this program, is the topic today, is support. One alcoholic talking to another, whatever you believe brings us together, that's it. If we don't show up, there's nothing. I'll end with this. Like, the script in my head has changed. Way changed. Way changed. I now walk down. First of all, I lost the weight, right? So that helped a lot. I lost it, quit smoking. I did all these other good things for myself, none of which I could have done without getting sober. Without clearing the fog, I never could have gotten the right diagnosis for my anxiety. I never could have lost weight. Nothing was possible. Basically, my life would have been a literally plodding, slow walk to death. Now I walk down the street, and sometimes, on a good day, I'm like, oh, I think he thinks I'm hot. Oh, maybe he wants to invite me in the car, which is not something I would do. I'm a safety girl now, like, back then I woulda. Trying to find self-worth and love, or sex. But now I think that sometimes. Do I have days when I'm in the mirror like a puddle of self-loathing? Sure, because I'm human. What AA gave me was how to be a real man, woman, human. It taught me how to be a real human, how to treat other people with respect, how to use my moral compass, which was always there. I ignored it. That's why I had a lot of shame. I knew right from wrong, and I didn't do it. I didn't make those choices. Now I get to make the choice. This is a choice. And if God brought you in here or not, you still are doing it. Like, it's still you. There is some part of you in here. And every day that you don't drink, you have a choice to make. And that is a personal choice. That is personal responsibility. So every day you don't drink, take a little credit for yourself too. Don't give it all away. We adopt new habits, in my experience, by congratulating ourselves sometimes. Like, if we don't take anything for ourselves, we can't really rewire our brains in the same way. It helps to say, good for me. I did this too. Whatever you want to give it up to. it's important to remember how important you are in the process. So AA gave me back my life. It really did. I have never been happier. That does not mean I'm happy every day. I do not have a perfect life. I am, after all, married to him. So you can only imagine, if you were here when he spoke, my giant Japanese toddler. Every day is not perfect, but it is beyond my wildest dreams, because before AA, I never had a dream. Thank you.